Hi, this is Dr. B. It's about 10 to 5 on a Thursday afternoon. I am going away this weekend. He smiled, which doesn't mean I'm not available to you. If you want to try to find me, you could send out the drones or you can text me or email me if you really have an emergency, he shouted, or something you really want to know. I'll try to get back to you. But I'm kind of off the clock this weekend more than I am usually. And this video will actually go up next Tuesday. So I won't be here. I guess I should put it up soon if you would, otherwise you wouldn't know that I was away. So I will put it up today. And then to open up for today, but it doesn't have any real applicability until the present week is finished because you do have some work to do for that. And it'll be more brief than usual, I think. And I'll just get started without making any more speeches. So I'm going to share. And I'm going to open up my agenda, and you'll have that agenda um, posted up as well in the Canvas modules. And quickly speaking, Malloy 1029. What day is the 29th? Today is the 25th. What day is today? 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So this is actually going up, for Tuesday, as I said, all the way through the 7th. And there's two things to note about November 7th. And the first one would be that we have a synchronous meeting on the 7th. I'll come back to that in a second. And I'm looking forward to that because I enjoy seeing everybody in the same place at the same time. It's the old-fashioned part of my instructional arsenal that I enjoy using the most. And that will be 2 days after the election. And a short story with that would be please vote one way or the other, but vote so that we can be more nearly certain that we'll have the country that we want our future to be about. Since this course is in its own way about the future, and we'll take it from there. And those are the two things I wanted to say about that. This is I'm going to show you the agenda for the 7th. It's not even an agenda yet. I'll just read it to you rather than open it up. I just made a quick list of the things I know I want to do on that day. All right, so we'll always have a housekeeping thing. I will always continue to go back to two-dimensional futuring. I think it's in today's agenda too. I'll always go back to futures wheel and cross impact as a two-dimensional or futures forecastings, and then I'm going to add a three-dimensional skill set as well that will take a good chunk up of the 2 hours that will hopefully put you in a very good place to complete your strategic plan. And that's why we're doing it at that point. And whatever else you may have in your mind, I will certainly make a room for it if I can. Even if I can't, I will make room for it. So that is the agenda for next, I guess, the Thursday, the 7th, whatever day that is. So that's a little bit out, and we'll go from there. The feedbacking process continues. I'm pleased now that people are starting to chase me down and ask me questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them. I was on the phone with one person yesterday, and we had a great conversation, and she has even agreed to help me think some other things through down the line. So we have that going on. And I've been giving feedback to people as they offer their topics up to me. The only pattern I'm seeing, first of all, the ideas look pretty good to me. I haven't seen an idea that I would say, oh, no, you can't do that, don't do that. But I will say that there are several that are probably too broad, and that's understandable. You haven't done this before. It's a skill set that you've have really been part of before having taken this course, unless you were a business major. I think Andrew is a business major in this class, so he might recognize some of this. But on the whole, this is a business process that we're talking about, and not all of us have seen it, and nor have had the experiences to really go full in depth with what this is about. And we're not even going in full in depth with what this is about in this course because of the time constraints and other topics falling on top of each other. Nonetheless, the what I've noticed with come back to the strategic plan is often the ideas are just a little too broad. And then when I see that, that's not a problem. I just tell you it's too wide, and you lose your mind trying to pull that together between now and the end of the semester. And I never remember the end of the semester. I know. I think it's the 5th, but I could be wrong about that. I guess I should look that up one of these days. I just keep going forward till they tell me to sit down. At any rate, uh, it's the first or second week in December, so that's not very far away. And I've been investing a lot of time in you to make sure that that you're able to complete this in a better than successful way. And part of that is about making it specific enough so that you're able to complete that assignment without losing your mind. And so if someone says to me, well, I want to raise the achievement for all ENL students. The red flags and the yellow flag all go up all at the same time. And I say, that's a great goal. It's a goal I would totally endorse if we were doing a true strategic plan. But the truth of the matter is that's way too broad. So you need to, narrow it down. I was thinking about another course actually with that. Well, I know another student doing a similar topic in another course whose district is transitioning from K5, no, K6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to the more standard approach in these past several years, which would be K5, sometimes even K4, and then 6, 7, 8, and then 9, 10, 11, 12. And people don't recognize there's all sorts of futures associated with it, all sorts of outcomes and scenarios you have to consider. And she came back and said, I want to do it strictly in science. I'm a science teacher, and there are some real planning issues that have to take place for general education teachers who are now going to be teaching 6th grade semi-departmental team approaches, non-certified, to be able to teach science as the 6th graders. So there's all sorts of issues associated with that. And so she did. She narrowed it down, came down through the funnel, and it's going to be a very relevant and very important topic for her class and for her career. So the feedback continues. If you have a question, you need feedback, you do any of the things I spoke about. You yell, Dr. B, and maybe I'll hear you. You send me psychic dreams. Sometimes I feel like I hear them. We have two tin cans and a string, and you shout into one side, and I hear it on my side. There are smoke signals. There's tom-toms. There's FaceTime. There's Skype. I never did learn how to use Skype, but I would use Skype if you. That's the only one you know how to use. And there's Zoom, and there's phone calls, and there's texts. If you call me or if you text me, as I said a couple of times early on, just to identify who you are and what course that you're in. Sometimes that mix people up. And if you just talk to me from a phone number and I don't recognize the number, then it takes 5, 10 minutes just to figure out, how I have to adjust for which course that you're in, because they're not the same courses. So the feedback will continue all the way through. We're going to spend considerable time on that on Thursday the 7th. I don't know if I can do. I haven't figured that part out so well, but if I can do, I'll probably do some small breakout sessions on that Thursday to troubleshoot general questions to move you through. And I would say that by the middle of November, let's say the 14th, you should have a roughed out plan in place. Not finished. Heavens no, not finished, but you should have it roughed out for my more specific feedback so that when you can then move forward. I had a couple of questions from this class too about I thought I made it pretty clear, but I suppose I have not. And that is you're going to do that template. One question was, can I change the template? And the answer is absolutely. Just keep the components of it, but you can move it around and redesign it any way you want. I'm not going to argue. I'm fine with that. So you're going to give me an overview of those premises, then you're going to give me a 6 or 7 slide uh, PowerPoint presentation that you're going to do and present to the folks in your class. And that'll do it. Enough said. Look it up. So that's that point, and then we go to the rest of the what this is about today. We're going to go from the title of Folan's book, chapter 4. I went back to chapter 4 because I think it's maybe the best chapter in the book. It's a pretty decent book. I wouldn't have been the book I would have assigned if it hadn't been required the way it is, but it's certainly not a terrible book to use. And so the chapter entitled "Why Planning Fails," it might be a little premature for you to recognize in terms of completing the plan, but it'll certainly give you some things to think about. So when we talk about strategic planning modeling, we're going to talk about the case for futuring, its rationale, and some. I'm going to mention some book titles to you that I may or may not be in the bibliography, but it's certainly among several I could recommend that would wet your whistle, and probably get you to really start thinking about what this is about. And I dropped back to November 5th with voting because essentially a vote is your probable future. I'm sorry, wrong. It's your preferable future. You're choosing candidates, all the offices that are up for grabs on the 5th, up and down the ticket, who you think represent what you want the future to look like, your preferable future. And what you've done between your ears is you've looked around and you've said to yourself, this is what I think is probably the future. And then you need to decide whether you like what you think the probable, sometimes I call it the emerging future, whether you like that or you don't. If you don't like it, then you vote for the candidate who claims to be able to vote, claims to be voting for uh, the preferable future that you have. And if you keep those concepts in front of you, you can see how this translates backwards to school planning on any level, whether it be the district level or on the building level, or anything for that matter that you have some plans to do. One other quick point is that I think I may have told you this, I'm a Disney World idiot savant. Yeah, the savant, not just the idiot. I can pretty much tell you almost everything you need to know about a trip to Disney World, having been there a jillion times. And first of all, that's a great example of a systems thinking organization. Not always the best, but certainly better than most. And the other part of that premise is that they recognize alternative futures from many counts. But when I plan to go with now just with my wife usually, and sometimes one daughter and some grandchildren instead of the Western world, I have the spreadsheet out. I know the times. I know what we're going to eat. I know how much if we're going to turn left or right when we enter a park or decide to do a pool day or whichever, and where we're going to stay. And it's probably planned out a little bit too nerdily, but it's an example of maximizing what we think is our most preferable future insofar as how we want to enjoy that kind of vacation. We went to Italy this summer and we didn't do that. There was no matrix, and we wandered around a lot of times and made a million mistakes, which I regret on many counts. Enough said about that. So the case for futuring and the rationale. First, I'm going to mention 2 books in the general context, and one is a book that's written by Peter Diamandis, and I think he had a co-author whose name I can't remember. Actually, he wrote 2 books with, I think the second one is The Future is Happening Sooner Than You Think, #2, or something like that, part 2. I'm referring to his first book, which I believe was written in '96. This is kind of old, actually. And the one in this part 2 is more recent. But here the title, So basically what I'm driving at. The future is happening sooner than you think. And when you read the book, it's divided nicely among all sorts of categories. There's one for medicine, there's one for education, there's one for business and economics, there's one for politics and foreign policy, I believe. And what he and his co-author have done is like pointed out things that are happening now that you and I wouldn't ordinarily even be familiar with. I often use and I've used it with you folks, um, the premise of three Ps when it comes to the future. Actually, there's four Ps. I'll talk about that before I finish this course. And the one piece is this possible, probable, and future. Now, generally, I'll say something like, "What's possible? Pigs could fly. I guess it's possible." And I always use that as something that sounds virtually impossible. But after you read if you decided to read this book, you would find that there are medical, um, scientific, technological breakthroughs coming together where, in fact, they would be able to get pigs to fly or grow wings at least, uh, with a little more time. Um, Another quick example is flying cars or driverless cars. And there are already driverless cars on the road in several cities. A friend of mine had a great story about that when he was in San Francisco. Um, Flying cars have been projected to be in use by now, but they're not for any number of reasons. But if you think about it, when driverless cars and um, flying cars become more of the norm, of course, in the next 5 to 10 years, will you need parking lots? How many times have you thought about parking lots? Do you know that if you add up all the space that is devoted to parking lots in the United States, they would total up to the state of Delaware. Now, what would you do with the state of Delaware if it was empty with parking lots? I could think of a lot of things, but one thing that people have begun to do in certain places is begin to use it for solar farms. I was telling one of I think it was Maryland in this class the other day that our golf courses on Long Island are starting to dry up a little bit. That is to say, there are fewer. Some have gone out of business. And what's happened is that several of them out east have become solar farms. Nice and open. There are some trees, but it's not a forest. And they'd be able to convert the sunlight to power to use in some of those locales. That's a future's change. That's a future change that it has happened already, as such. And so as you go to look at this book and you start to see some things that are going on, even in education, which is as slow as a snail in terms of how well it changes, uh, it's a great book to read. A book that's similar in tone, but it's a little more narrow in focus, is a book called Signals Are Talking. Great website with this. The Signals Are Talking by Amy Webb, who's a professor of future studies in NYU. I would love to meet her. I would love to work for her. And this is among several books that she's written. And this one is very technologically based and essentially forecasts technological interventions that I never thought of. That's going to require us to think differently, no doubt. And we all can come up with examples. I was playing around with a friend of mine, well, two friends of mine, and I are finishing up a book, and we started to play around with artificial intelligence to help us figure out how things might be rearranged in the book, and it's truly astounding. I mean, I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of these things. Truly astounding, scary. Actually, we're not going to use the things because we're still thinking about what the book should look like. But when we use the way the AI was rearranging some things we've already written, uh, A, the book would be done, and B, the book would be pretty good. Pretty good. I don't know if it'd be better than us actually writing the book, but no, that's enough said. So Amy Webb's book is The Future, the Signals Are Talking, or anything that she writes is darn good. Now, I'm not, I didn't require the book. I'm not requiring the book. I'm not requiring the book. I'm not requiring the book. But any of the books I've written always speak to futuring. And so I'm just going to actually read you some segments from this. And since it's my book, I don't have to get permission to quote it. So I'm just going to read a few quick things. Think about, in essence, you are responsible for what I call an alchemy. If you're not familiar with the word, it's about alchemists from the Middle Ages. And alchemists were proto scientists. Truly speaking, they weren't scientists that we can imagine specifically, but they were folks who thought they were practicing science in any number of ways when they tried to take substances like lead, but not only lead, the mineral lead, and transform them into gold. And they failed. They weren't able to do that. Although nowadays I understand it can be done with some machines that we've made, but only in very minor amounts. And so, at any rate, what futurists, edufuturists, are about transforming. I don't like that word. It's used way too often. About transforming how we approach change in how we school or educate students. And when you think about the premise of future, I mean, I've already shared several points with you, so I'm not going to belabor that. But I will tell you some things. I will repeat one premise, and that is that I truly believe, and you can't get me to think otherwise. I can get kind of pig-headed about certain things. I truly believe that we should have foreseen the COVID crisis. Now, that is not to mean that that is not to mean that we should have known a COVID crisis was going to come in 1919 on March 2nd. That is not what I mean by that. That's a prediction. Predictions generally are almost always wrong. What I am talking about is the fact that futurists and the leaders have to be futurists, have to consider what the emerging futures seem to be by looking at the signals, the population trends, economic trends, the ecological trends, and either head them off, work with them, or try to reverse them. I had one quick war story. I had a teacher. I was in charge of the ESL. I was pupil personnel director quite a few years ago. It's a long story how I got that position. And I ran the ESL program. The ESL program consisted of one teacher, Charlie. And Charlie had all the ESL kids. I think there were maybe 10. They were mostly from China. I don't think we had too many Hispanic kids at that point. So he came in to see me just around budget time and said, Rich, we need another teacher. I said, what do you mean? He says, we're going to double the size of our population of ESL kids next year. I said, really? Show me how you know that. So he said he had really spoken to the students whom he had, and they said, yeah, my cousin's coming, my mother's coming, who's coming? Not the mother, but there were kids coming in that he knew about. He said, we need another teacher to handle the influx. So sounds right to me, I thought. So I went down to see my superintendent at the time, and I told him what Charlie told me, and he said, hire. I'll hire one. If you need to hire two, but hold off on that if you have to, because of the finances. But we're going to need more than two up the road. He says, because my district is in central Suffolk County. Uh, he said, because the Latino population was exploding on the north and south shore, primarily more of Long Island, and coming down the spine of Long Island, which would be like sort of like the Long Island Expressway. And these kids are going to need to be taught. We need to adjust what we do. And let's kick it off by doing what you asked for. That's futuring, folks, because he was a very clever man when it came to certain things. He understood that the economy was changing, and he understood that in fact that population was moving in. If we weren't ready for it, after I retired, I was working for state ed for several years, and I had to go to a district that was almost entirely Latino, and whose population was really having academically bad achievement problems. So I went to I'm not sure how to say this other than the way I'm saying it. I went to the all-white, old guy leadership in the district and said, I'm here to help you, close the gap. And they were very nice. They said, no, yeah, there's no gap. I said, well, I'm looking at the numbers and there's major gaps in every place you look. Well, the kids, they're great, nice kids, but my staff isn't ready to teach. My all-white staff wasn't ready to teach them, and don't feel the need to do that. They'll come around. And we had a little mud wrestle about that, and eventually they did change, but it took a couple of years before they saw the light. I went to sit in a consult in another district in Nassau County, and I was sitting on a site-based team meeting. And the superintendent came, who was the principal then. It was an old District K. Every kindergarten kid in the district all went to one building. Uh, and I went to the site-based team, and he came in, it was somewhere in early spring, and he came in with the registration figures for the coming year. And he just handed them out to the group. It was parents, the nurse, a reading teacher, and a couple of union people, if I remember right. And he just gave it out and didn't say anything. And the reading teacher raised his hand and said, Mr. So-and-so, we're doubling our population of ESL next year. We're going from 20 to 40, something like that. He said, really? He said, oh, okay. And then he went on to another item on the agenda. And the reading teacher was, well, time out, wait a minute. I mean, we're going to need new materials. We're going to need some professional development. He says, really? And he skipped over what the reading teacher said and then went on and completed the agenda, most of which was trivial, waste of time kinds of things. Sure enough, this reading teacher was right. And they were not prepared to adjust what they do and learn new teaching strategies and find the right appropriate materials to train the rest of the staff to work with these children and help work with the parents for that matter. And it took a while for them to adjust. They did actually pretty well down the line, but bad futuring because we're not good at futuring in school systems. You could be the New York City school system. You could be up in Taconic, where one of my friends is from. You could be out east someplace on Long Island, and the same principle with an Ellie would prevail, and that would be we are not great futurists. We don't make the time to do it very well, except perhaps at budget time. When we try to come up with a financial spending plan for 1 year, you're not allowed to do more than 1 year of a budget. And so we do year to year to year, and what it does is this causes all sorts of problems. When I was assistant superintendent, I was trying to come up with a modernized technology program, and I worked very hard with some experts on developing with my staff and with community, with my staff to come up with a graduated step-by-step strategic plan to embed technology in all instruction, which was obviously we're going to require a lot of hardware as well as PD. And we estimated at the numbers very clearly, something I'm not asking you to do in your course, in this course. We know how much money we were going to spend per year. And the assistant superintendent of business was quite clever at figuring out how we could get bonds together to lease the computers rather than buy them. And I think the whole package over 5 years was going to cost around $5 or $6 million. Well, one board member was practically apoplectic. Apoplectic. He says, there isn't any way I'm going to vote for this. I'm not going to vote for this ever. He says, I'm never going to spend $5 million on anything in this district. Wasn't interested in futuring as such. And uh, truth of the matter is, we never got the plan in place. Not necessarily just because of this one person, but because I guess I'll blame myself, and the superintendent maybe to a lesser extent didn't sell the need, the futures-based need for things. And to come back to the COVID crisis, we knew that there were, by all kinds of studies, that there was all kinds of epidemic things rolling around in different parts of the world, causing real havoc in certain places. Uh, we knew that was there. Uh, we were warned by epidemiologists that sooner or later something would come to the United States or around the world and cause a lot of problems. Did we know COVID was happening on March 2nd, 2019? No. Do we know something was probably going to happen? Yeah, we did. And what did we do? We worked backward on trying to, uh, plug up all the holes that we did with our thumbs in our socks and uh, shoes to stop the dam from breaking. And in many cases, not very well, because we can now document that there was definitely a learning lag, uh, fallback in achievement across the board, because the nature of this talking head instruction, like I'm doing with you now, was not as effective as what we had been doing. Even that wasn't wonderfully effective, but more effective than what we were doing. If you think about it, certainly all graduate classes at Malloy, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, the ones I'm familiar with, were all online. I've worked in 4 or 5 other universities, and in each case, they've all moved to full online. No one does face to face anymore. It's a shame. I get it. It's also very convenient, and so tend to prefer it. Students tend to prefer that. Even it's kind of nice that I don't have to commute anywhere, but I do feel the difference because we did not project for it. Now, this is a scary forecast, and then I'll move on. I'm told, I've read, and can't remember the source, that China actually is preparing for a war with the United States by 2050, which is 25 years from now, 26. And the armed services has to prepare for a war with 2 billion people, however many people are in China as we speak. And so the Chinese have to prepare for this as well. I'm not laughing, but I'm just making that point. And suppose we had an invasion. We've never been invaded in the United States. Suppose we were invaded and everything's been disrupted. Would that stop education cold? Or would we have a plan in place for something like that? Last anecdote, I think I told you this one. Right before the COVID crisis, I was supposed to do a consult in strategic planning in a very poor district out in Western New York. And I knew the superintendent because he had been one of my students for his doctorate. And a pretty sharp guy and was making a name for himself in this particular district. So I had to call him up to tell him to finalize the plans for the summer consult we were going to do, retreat. And I said, you know what? Are you ready? And he said, for what? I said, are you ready for it? He said, what are you talking about? I said, they're going to close your school. He said, who's they? And I said, the government's going to close you down. There's an epidemic coming, a pandemic coming. People are going to be sick and they're going to die. Your schools won't be open. What are you going to do about it? So he kind of got flustered for a minute because always that's in the cities. They were in a very rural area. We're out, that's not going to happen here. I said, listen to me, it's going to happen everywhere. Now, what are you going to do about it? There's future for that. He said, oh, he says, every kid has a Chromebook. I said, okay, bingo. So that's good. What are you going to do when the kids are home and they have Chromebooks? He said, well, the kids here are very poor. Everybody's on free and reduced lunch. The whole population was free and reduced lunch. Um, Many of them live in trailers, and many don't have Wi-Fi. So I said, "So what are you going to do?" And he didn't have an answer. Well, he said, "We're going to run." And he finally figured out we'll run off a lot of material, and we'll hand deliver the material to the school to the children to do work at home, which we all know how well that probably worked. All lousy futuring. I'm not going to tell you how overweight I've become as I do less and less physical work, except playing golf and going to the gym. Uh, was I, should I have been futuring for that? When I would be more sedentary and less active by probably not having that Italian hero 20 years ago? Yeah. Should I have watched what I've been eating? Yes. Because we future every day. If then, well, every day in one sense or another. And you decide different things every day. Futuring. I decided to do this video today because I knew I didn't want to do it when I got back from where I'm coming back from. And so I'm doing it well in advance. So you'll have this video, so you won't miss a beat. That's planning and futuring. In my whole professional career, now again, longer than any of you have been alive, I have never worked with a class, whether they were seventh graders, fourth graders, or doctoral students and everything in between. Never had a course class I was teaching that didn't have a plan, something like this. Often much more complicated than this. Because I like to know that I have things set up so I know what it is I want to see happen. And so that is, that's my a case for futuring. Um, those two books I recommend, Co-Creating the Future. My latest book is shows you how to use a simulation to train and I'm using it with you folks, but in a very minor way. How you would engage in a simulation so you would be trained to actually run a retreat or run a strategic planning committee so they wouldn't miss a beat, or even something more minor like picking a new textbook. Or one of my daughters just got appointed to a committee in her district yesterday that is trying to create the portrait of an exemplary candidate, a high school graduate from the district. And the person, from what I can tell, just handed out material and say, "Here, read it, and then come back and tell me what you think." I like to use the word I'm thinking about, but this is a Catholic university, so I was going to say it's not a very good way to kick off a group of people. Because how many committees have you been on for all sorts of ideas that were just I thinks, rather than people hearing each other and co-creating what they need to do? Because we don't know how to do it. We don't have the skill sets. All right, so just to continue from that point, uh, I just want to reiterate that I've taught you how to do two if-then forecasting tools. If you read the Amy Webb books, or if you go online, I think a website is called The Future Today, you will find umpteen futures forecasting skills and graphics and all kinds of ways to do it. Terrific book. Some of which I use to develop my own book. But a lot of them are two-dimensional. Cicely Summers, and I can't remember the title of the book, but it is in my book's reference list. I can look that up right now. Cicely Summers' book. Give me a second. Summers. Cicely Summers, where are you? Oh, Cicely Summers. Think like a futurist. Know what changes, what doesn't, and what's next. Terrific book. Cicely Summers says that human beings are not very good at futuring out past about 10 years. After that, it gets very difficult for them. And that's understandable. There's too many variables to factor. Um, that's why I only asked you to do a 3 to 5 year plan. First, I was going to make you do 10, but you would have lost your mind trying to do that. And so all these things come together. I taught you two, and I'm going to do them again on next week on the 7th. So you have them practice. I would recommend strongly, strongly, strongly that you do them on your own for something simple, just to keep your muscle moving on this. Money back guarantee, the more you practice it, the better you're going to get at it. So those two-dimensional forecasting skills I taught you was futures wheels. It's basically an if-then ripple effect chart, and cross impact matrix or charting, which extends from futures wheels to see how things impact each other. The next one we're going to do is I call three-dimensional. And it is what it sounds like. Those are kind of superficial thinking. But now we're going to try to figure out, and it's going to make your hair hurt. We're going to try to figure out what's called scenario building. And scenario building is when and you're going to do this in 2 weeks, when you actually write out and present the scenario, the probable future that you've been assigned to demonstrate to us. So if you're, for example, in a group that doesn't, and I've given you these conditions, if you, for example, fall into a group where the district literally has no will to change, nor the resources to change, what will that district look like 5 years from now? Tell me a story about it. And there's 3 other choices as well. And then what we're going to do is pick out of those 4 choices what you think might be the probable future in the make-believe district we're going to solve. That's three-dimensional. And when you use that set of skills, you're going to have at least 3 skills under your belt, maybe probably more, that you can use to fill in that column about what could happen, which should dictate how your strategy should have been crafted to begin with. Enough said. Okie doke. So let's talk some more about content. Some of this is straight out of all of it actually, straight out of Fullen, although some of these sayings are mine. And so the first one is mine. All right. We have met the future, and it was missing a word. It is us. Did I put that in the right place? I don't think so. Here it is. Okay. We have met the future, and it is us. We are the sum, the SUM, of the futures that are emerging. For the good climate change, great example. You can see that the choices we have made have created maybe Hurricane Milton. I don't want to exaggerate, but certainly and Helene were examples of increasingly dangerous hurricanes. There's a tremendous drought out in the West that's seriously impacting the Western states and drying up the Colorado River. And when the Colorado River dries up, millions of people will be very thirsty. Some people say that the Saudi Arabians and the Chinese are buying up every water source they can now, and buying dams and whatnot. So they would have a monopoly, like, as the Saudi Arabians have had for many years. They've had a monopoly on oil. They will have a monopoly on water. And what will that mean? What would that story sound like there? And so that goes back to Fullen. And Fullen offers some reasons why this goes on. And it comes back to some of the same things I'm saying. We don't know how to plan. Educational leaders have not learned how to plan. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to involve staff. They don't know how to do the kind of thinking that's necessary, except for some, again, I'm dying to use a word with my Catholic University people, half implement, fill in the blank, half blank, implement budgeting. That's a futures technique, but it's not, it's an estimation of what the government, rather what the future seems to be tomorrow, certainly not 10 years from now or 5 years from now. It's hard. Fullen is absolutely right. Unless you get the training to do that. Now, you're going to become district leaders, presumably, and were you to learn how to, by way of the simulation I keep talking about, or from what we're doing here in this course, and because you're going to be tested on it. I don't like to talk about the silly test, about how you're going to construct a plan. What the shape the plan would take about the issue that the state ed testing program may present to you. And in addition to that, would have can be applied across any number of situations and issues. Now, Senge, I haven't talked enough about Senge. I'm going to because I can't leave this. I have a, figuratively speaking, not really. I would have a poster of Senge hanging on my in front over my desk right now. That's how much I am taken by Senge. Senge is an organizational structural theorist who studied business organizations, most any kind of organization you can think of. Not schools right away. That was a little later, but when he basically came up with it was a premise, and the premise was, I'm going to write it here. I may have said it to you before, but I want to say it again. What's called a learning organization. That's a tricky word for us educators because it sounds like it's a school. It's not that. It is not that. In fact, it's more nearly about the fact that it's an organization that continues to reinvent itself to learn. The examples I use in one of my books is Blockbuster. Many of you are too young to even remember Blockbuster. But Blockbuster was a very thriving company, I want to say 25 to 30 years ago, that rented out videotapes because no one had DVDs or streaming television sets. They had many had video cassette recorders, and on Friday nights, people would run to Blockbuster or to another video rental place and rent the most current popular movies that were out there and then return them. And Blockbuster made a lot of money on that. What Blockbuster didn't do was look at the future. And so along came Netflix, and Netflix did a couple of things. One thing was they saw DVDs, and they said that DVDs would be easier to handle. So they moved to renting out DVDs by mail, where you didn't have to go physically to a store and wait on a line. All you had to do was, order this thing, and then you had the movie and just pop it back in the mail when you're done with it. And that went on for a while. But Netflix was even smarter than that. Netflix started to look at what I would call streaming video. And what they did was they began to develop their own content. And so we all know about Netflix. We all know about Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and all the rest of them have developed streaming services because nowadays many, not most, but many people have smart TVs that enable you to stream. And what you have to do is click a few things and pay the money. You have all the movies you want at your fingertip, or any programs you want at your fingertip. Those who anticipated the premise were learning to continue themselves by seeing the future and adjusting for what they saw happening. As opposed to a Blockbuster. There's only one Blockbuster left in the whole United States, one in Alaska. Tells you all you need to know. Blacksmiths who made horseshoes so horses could pull around carts to run our economy would do one of two things. They continued to make horseshoes, even though there weren't any horses needed, because now we had automobiles and trucks, or they turned themselves into gas stations. And gas stations nowadays, or learning, and I don't know this for a fact, I'm just thinking out loud, are recognizing that there's a growing trend, not an overwhelming one, I don't think, but certainly a growing trend for electric and hybrid cars or non-gasoline fueled cars. And if I'm a gas station owner, I'm going to be smart and I'm going to somehow expand my services to support those cars. If nothing else, charging stations, which I still don't understand so much. And one thing about a gasoline car, you put the thing in the tank, bang, 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 you have a full tank of gas. I think you have to wait a long time for those things to charge up, don't you? I don't even know. Much as I kind of want one. So when Senge talks about a learning organization, that's what he's referring to. Now, you ready? I'm going to tell you a secret. Schools are lousy learning organizations. They don't reinvent themselves. But you know what? They're a monopoly. And so they don't have to really change that much. Unless you're in some districts that suffer by, and often unfairly, by reputation or by their ability to meet the needs of the students whom they have, who are being competed with parochial schools, with homeschooling, and charter schools. I was on the board of education for a charter school for like a minute and a half, and the people who were running are very, very sincere and nice people. I had no quarrel with who they were and what they wanted to do. Uh, but they were mean-spirited too about a lot of things, and I just couldn't be part of it, so I politely left. But the school doesn't know what to do with all the kids who are trying to get into it because it's a false dissatisfaction with the district in which it's housed. And so public schools are still the monopoly, but some of their exclusiveness is beginning to erode. In fact, one of the candidates for president, and I'm not going to say who, is advocating that we give them more power, the non-public schools, more money uh, at the expense of the public school systems. Senge explains, and I've said this to you about 10 different ways, but this is straight out of Senge when he says, not by fiat or command. You can't run a learning organization as if you're some kind of autocratic dictator. It crumbles. It won't work. The hierarchy that drips down, and we've spoken about more than once, is not equipped to sustain the commands that they send down the pipeline. Instead, the ideas have to be curried, nurtured, developed by everyone who had been trained to think that way. And I'm going to show you how to do some of that before this semester is finished. I don't know if I said this to you before, but if I said to you, give me two uses for this thing, you're going to say, well, to highlight and to write. Those aren't really very creative ideas, but they're ideas that clearly are accurate. If I said to you, you can also use this to poke somebody's eye out, you would say, get out of here. You can't do that. But you know what? You can. It is a third use for this. Poking somebody's eye out as a weapon. That's called lateral thinking. It's called, a fancy word for it, it's called fluent thinking. When you can think about many ideas rather than just the obvious ones. I hate this phrase, but here it comes. When leaders teach their staff how to think out of the box, hate that phrase, but everybody understands it, so I'm using it. And to go back to Senge, then we're talking about not by fiat or command for long term. But short term, maybe you can put your thumb in the dike and stop the water from the dike from falling apart, rather than somehow rebuilding the dike so it doesn't cause the damage that the eroding structure is causing. And this can only be done, according to Senge, by having 5 practices. I'm going to tell you what they are. I'll put them here, but I think I may have already told you these, but I'm not going to try to explain them today. And no order. One would be a shared vision. Another one would be the ability to work in teams, to learn together. Another one would be where we try to help our staff get new skills. And if one, two, three, four, another one would be to be able to respect mental models, even if they're crummy ones. At least honor them, let them flow out. And the last one would be the most obvious one. That would be to think systemically. Only then would Senge claim that um, an organization can be a learning organization. And here's the question to put under your pillow tonight. You ready? To what extent does your school system practice those five premises? Real quick, I just got a text from one of my nieces as I was talking to you. When we're going to Italy, I sat down next to this guy. And I'm looking at him. I know him, but I can't remember who he is. Turns out I had him for his doctorate, and he did his dissertation with me. And at the time, he was working as an administrator in a school district in Queens. And what he did was he administered an instrument, a measuring device, to measure what teachers thought of whether those five premises existed their middle school. And he administered the instrument to teachers from five middle schools. And what he found was very clearly that the schools that scored the best on NYSESLAT, you don't know, NYSESLAT is an ESL instrument to measure progress. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job by explaining that. The ones that had the highest scores had the highest scores in this teacher's recognition that those five premises existed. If you're missing one of them, the tower tumbles. You have to have all five there. Not equally necessarily, but they all have to be there. If you're missing respect for people's points of view, it ain't going to happen. If you're missing the teachers don't know how to learn in a team together, which is very frequent, then it won't work. So working from that and talking about this premise of why planning fails, this is a major yes, but something to pay attention to from the get-go. Now, according to me, I would add to these things, yeah, it is hard. That's why I've written books about it and developed simulations about it. It's also about, and Singer kind of speaks to this, but I don't think he hits it hard enough. It's about culture, which is one reason why I keep hitting you over the head with that C word. It's about culture. The more, you have to get your arms around your objective estimation of what the culture is telling you. And it's also about, is this spelled right? Dispositions. It's also about dispositions, which is part of culture, but I'm just pulling it out to be more specific with it. What is I think I'll put this up next week. Somebody remind me to do this. I'll do this on the Thursday the 7th, and only because I remember her name. Marilyn, I just gave you the job to remind me about futures-based attitudes. And I will give you a little device to see what each of you thinks about what the future is and what the extent to which you can control the future. Because many of you say, oh, well, it's just fate, yeah, the car hit him and plastered him all over the road. Well, that's the way the future takes you. Other ways to look at that, and so on. So it's about dispositions. If you don't believe that you can collectively change what needs to be changed, you can't have the change. Change has to, and you can't impose the change. He shouted. So those premises together with Senge and Fullen, I think, all make some good points. And so in a real change process, what are the criteria? This is from Fullen. I think this is pretty good. I wanted to re-emphasize it. And that would be, what do you need to think about before you go? And this would help you think about your own change idea for your own strategic plan. Does the change idea meet an unmet need? Is it a priority for most people? Do you have enough resources? And that's a tricky question. Not always about money, folks. Do you have the technical assistance, like a consultant or a trained leader like yourselves, all right, to work your way through this process? You don't snap your fingers and do this in 2 weeks. A strategic plan, construction of one can take months. And that goes back to this point here. Do the stakeholders you want to work with have a deep understanding of the change process itself? Which would mean if you're going to start a change process, you have to school them on that somehow or another before you start. Otherwise, you're just going to be whistling in the dark. And to come back to this point, I can't say it enough time, goes back to dispositions. What is the dominating mindset about the future? In fact, I'll do that on that Thursday, the 7th. We'll kick you off by saying, let's figure out what your view of the future is. I'm not going to ask you to tell me today. Now, last point I want to make, I always have trouble bringing these things up. In fact, I'm not even going to do it. I'm going to tell you to do it. Rhetorical question. How many times have you sat in a committee to pick a textbook, come up with rules for discipline, change the testing program? I mean, there's more things than you can shake a stick at that we've all been on committees for. I was sitting on a committee this morning at a university, and I wanted to, jump out a window because nobody knew what they were doing. I wasn't running the meeting, so I sort of kept quiet, much as I know how to be quiet, which isn't good. But the bottom line was Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions were rampant in this meeting I was in today. And you've been in parts of committees where same thing happens. Patrick Lencioni wrote a book, and I think the book is like $16, well worth having. He also has like a training kit you can buy. I don't remember what that cost. We were in a live class. I would probably be using that with you to train you in that. But the book itself is clear enough, and this YouTube will fill in, will at least give you something of a knowledge about this. And essentially, what this is, what Lencioni identified with dysfunctions, things you shouldn't be doing in a group that will obstruct the group's charge to do what it's supposed to do. We have all experienced everything that's here. So think of a triangle. You'll see that on the video that I'm not going to bring up. All right. And the very bottom step of the five levels is obviously the base that holds the rest of the triangle up or makes it crumble. And that would be distrust, a level of trust. A dysfunction is having no trust. Have you been in committees where people haven't trusted each other? I think I was in one today. How many times have people listened to each other when you get, well, I think, and no one's paying any attention to whatever the meaningful dialogue might be. And there are 4 other levels, but I'm just going to give you this one about trust. You as a leader will you might even want to put this into your information gathering strategy box. Assess the 5 dysfunctions, because if these things are impeding the ability of the group to effectively plan, then you'll be wasting your time. Enough said. I don't know if I said this to this class or not. I know I said it pretty recently somewhere. I was doing a shared decision making a couple of years ago in a school district in the middle school, and very nice people. Must have been 15 to 20 parents, teachers, union people, staff were all part of this group, and I was just getting them off the ground. And one thing I did, which is not mentioned here, is I was giving them data. Now, data, the word data, which is a plural word, as you know, is a tricky word for teachers and these kinds of groups to work with, because typically, I was just sharing with my daughter yesterday, and she made the mistake most people do, It's not just test scores and attendance rates. It is those things because it's quantitative data, but isn't it all the data? It's what people feel and what they tell you and what the relationships are, what the culture is that needs to be assessed. Nevertheless, I handed out their special education uh, kids, not the kids' names, but the scores, the general scores on the ELA at the time. Didn't say anything. I said, "What do you folks think?" And I got crickets for about a minute, which felt like 50 minutes. And finally, the industrial arts teacher, whom I had had in a class, and it was a pretty sharp guy, he raised his hand and said, "Well, I'm afraid to say this." So I said, "Afraid to say it?" And he said, "I think people will get mad at me when I say this, and I'm fearful of that." So I said, "Well, it's up to you. If you're not comfortable, then don't say it, or we'll work with whatever the response is." He said, "Okay." He said, "I don't think the special education program in this building works." And I will use a word that you don't use in Catholic schools very often. Damn, he was right for everything I had learned about the place. It didn't work for lots of reasons, structural and systemic things. So I didn't say anything. I waited a little bit, and then a woman raised her hand. Turned out she was a parent, but she was also the nurse in the school. But she was representing the parents, with several parents representing the parents. And she looked at the fellow and she said, I'm really insulted about that. She said it nicely. She wasn't throwing her shoe at him. He said, we're here to exchange ideas and get down to the bottom line. What's some things we want to change and make improve. So the fact that you said that you don't think the special education program doesn't work, we need to understand that better. We need to get our fingernails dirty and get into and figure out what's going on here. You need to trust us. And if that woman, I didn't pay her to say that, but I wish it's as if I wrote the script for her to say that. And that group did coalesce. There was other issues too we had to solve, but that's really where this comes from. So hear me on this. For sure, I'll tell you a secret. This book is called Co-Creating in the Future. I wanted to call it Alchemy, and the publisher wouldn't let me. To this day, I'm still ripping what's left of my hair out. And he thought it was too mystical, and people wouldn't buy the book. And not that many people are buying it anyway. So I said, alchemy, this is such a rich idea. So, but I lost on that one. And that book is called Co-Creating the Future, which isn't a terrible title. But the alchemy, the transformation I talked to you about is the extension of the material I'm sharing with and the ideas I'm sharing with you now. And you will be able to think about your own plan in the same way after you absorb what this video is telling you. How do you arrange all the chess pieces to get what you want, but without thinking about these premises and the other ones that we haven't even addressed yet from my book or whatever. Which brings me to the discussion question. And there are so many reasons, and again, I thought this was probably the best chapter in the Fullen book. And so after reviewing Fullen's chapter 5, I said 4, but I guess it's 5, and considering your own experiences in school systems, please offer your priority reasons from what you've seen on whatever committees you've been on. Why, if you have been on any committee, make something up, but I don't believe you. Everybody's been on a committee for something. Why most strategic and operational planning flop. Now, after you answer that, then I'm more interested in the second sentence there. What are you doing in the plan you are developing to mitigate failure and more nearly assure the plan's success? I've given you that hint already. I've already told you the hint. You just have to go back into that template and play it through, see where it is. There's 2 places, actually. So what are you doing in the plan you're developing to mitigate failure and more nearly assure success? Again, you want to bounce that off me ahead of time? That's great. This discussion question is not due until I think the 6th or the 7th of November. So you have plenty of time to marinate in this before those. I think you have a discussion question that's still due within the next couple of days. And with that, we're done. Again, I won't be in town this weekend, but I'm not going to be in Disney World, so I can probably get back to you if you have something you really feel you need to know, or you can, maybe ask a colleague and check back with me. Okay. So I stopped the share, and I will tell you I'm truly enjoying working with you, and I appreciate your investment. I'm still waiting for several of you to tell me what your idea is. And I said I wasn't going to remind you, and I did anyway.